Things have changed. If you're considering moving to Charleston in 2024, then watch this video. We'll talk about what it's like living here, all the good things, all the bad things, and everything in between. I've put together this updated pros and cons list based on feedback from my clients and from you guys, my viewers. So let's get into it. Starting with the pros, the first on the list is relative affordability. Charleston is affordable compared to larger major cities like Boston, New York City, or Miami. The median home price across the Charleston Tri-County area is $406,000. It ranges from about $350,000 on the low end to $500,000 and up. You'll find homes in the $350,000 range in places like North Charleston and Goose Creek, and you'll find homes in the 400s and 500s in West Ashley and other parts of Charleston, all the way up to $800,000 and $900,000 in places like Mount Pleasant. And of course, your home price is going to vary depending on how close you are to the city center and how close you are to the beach. For example, homes in West Ashley are more expensive than homes in Goose Creek. And that's because West Ashley is closer to the beaches and it's closer to downtown Charleston, which is Charleston's city center. So our prices aren't too bad, especially when you consider the next pro, which I've already mentioned is the beach. And who doesn't love the beach, right? We have 3 main beaches nearby in the Charleston area, and we have more beaches all along the coast to the north and to the south. There's the popular Folly Beach, the Isle of Palms, and the Sullivan's Island Beach. These beaches have public parking, they've got picnic areas, they also have restaurants and shopping nearby. When I go to the beach, I see a lot of people with their dogs, I see kids building sandcastles, and I see other people surfing and paddleboarding, and I even saw this one guy windsurfing with a fan on his back and he was flying through the air. So you'll see all kinds of activities at the beach. And since we are on the coast, I do have some friends that like to take their boat out year-round, even in the middle of December. And we have different marina options if you need a place for your boat. There are some in downtown Charleston, Mount Pleasant, Daniel Island, Isle of Palms, so we have spaces for your boat anywhere you go, pretty much. And we can do things like this year-round because it stays relatively warm. I mean, right now it's January and I still go to the beach every week. And I just love going there. I happen to live 10 minutes from the beach, so I just take full advantage of that. So if you want to live within a short drive of the beach, feel free to call me, text me, send me an email. My name's Kristyn. I was born and raised right here in Charleston, and I'm also a realtor, and I work with my mom, so you'll find my information and her information in the description below. So the next pro is actually the warm weather. Our weather typically ranges from the 70s to the 90s in the summer, and in the winter it's usually about from the 40s to the 60s, sometimes the 70s and 80s. It's just a little bipolar in the winter. It'll be cold, sometimes it's chilly, then sometimes it's warm again. So if you're a snowbird coming from the north, you can take all your thick winter jackets and throw them out because you won't need them anymore. Now the next pro is all the activities we have here in Charleston. So let's start with the outdoor activities. I already mentioned the water sports and beach related activities, but did you know Charleston has public county parks here? You might know about the famous Battery in the historic downtown Charleston, but we also have parks in other parts of town. There's the James Island County Park, the Wanamaker Park, the Riverfront Park in North Charleston, and there are other parks in West Ashley and Somerville as well. At some of these parks, you can rent bikes, you can rent paddle boats, you can go kayaking and fishing at their docks, and there are also typically playgrounds for the kids. They also have picnic tables in a picnic area, so those are popular for birthday parties and other events like that. And that's just the outdoor activities. Pretty much every week you'll find an event, and we have major events throughout the year as well. So there is the famous Piccolo Spoleto Festival every year. There is the Greek Festival. There's also the Charleston Food and Wine Festival in Mount Pleasant. The Charleston Food and Wine Festival is where people come from all across the country to taste great food and great wine here in Charleston. And aside from cultural events like those, there is of course also the nightlife and the entertainment scene. There are concerts happening throughout the year at places like the Gilliard Auditorium and the Charleston Music Hall. You can find orchestras, musicians on tour, comedians, and we even host TEDx talks here. So I recently went to the Charleston Music Hall to see a comedian, and it was such a good time. They had drinks at the bar, they had snacks, and the event was such a fun time. It was awesome. So I recommend going to the Charleston Music Hall. And one of my other favorite things to do is go to the Candlelight Orchestra. They have a string quartet, play popular songs. So far, I've been to the Vivaldi series where they played the Four Seasons. I've seen the Queen series and the Adele series. So that was a lot of fun. Basically what they do is they have the quartet playing and there's a bunch of candlelights around it. And then they played the most popular songs from their set list, and it's just a fun time. I would recommend doing that too. And of course, if you're new in town and you want to make new friends, there are plenty of meetup groups to join. I've met friends from a lot of those meetup groups, so that's just a great thing to go to if you're new. They have cycling groups, they have running groups, stand-up paddleboard groups, literally any interest you have. There is probably a group for it on meetup.com in Charleston. So search meetup.com and you're gonna see all kinds of people in all kinds of ages doing fun stuff there. Now the next pro is the food scene here in Charleston. I mentioned earlier that people come from across the country to come to the Food and Wine Festival in Charleston, but year-round, we also have some great restaurants here. Of course, we're famous for the seafood, the soul food, the southern fare, and you'll find those at places like Hyman's Seafood, Page's Okra Grill, or the Charleston Crab House. But what you might not know is that we also have international food of all kinds. We've got Indian food, Ethiopian, Pakistani, Thai food, so there is a wide variety of foods to choose from. All it takes is a quick search on Google and you'll see all the 4.5 and 5-star reviews for the restaurants we have here. So if you like good food, hit the like button down below. I really appreciate it and it helps out this channel. So I'll give you one more pro before we get into the cons, and that pro is schools. I know, a lot of you called me and were hesitant about the school system in South Carolina. And while I can't speak about all the school districts in the entire state of South Carolina, I do know Charleston very well. You might not know this, but I am actually a product of the Charleston public school system. I went to Academic Magnet High School, which is the #2 public school in the nation, according to US News and World Report. So I'm gonna be here to break the stereotype for you. According to niche.com, we have highly rated schools here in Charleston, and we have 3 different counties with 3 different school systems. Of course, there is Charleston County, which you would expect, right? But there's also Berkeley County, and there's the highly rated Dorchester County school system. I'll put screenshots here of the highly rated schools. So in Dorchester District 2, I know of course there is the Ashley Ridge High School, there's Rawlings Middle School for the arts, and Beach Hill Elementary. And again, Dorchester District 2 is highly rated and it's expanding. Since so many people are moving here, the school systems have been reinvigorated with funds to hire more staff, to expand the schools, and to expand their curriculum for students. So there will be an opportunity for you to enroll your kids in school here, but just make sure you do it as soon as possible when you move here. Typically, to do that, they just need a few documents to confirm that you are now living here. So feel free to check out the school on niche.com. I've already covered some of them briefly in past videos, so check out my videos, especially my Somerville video. You know what, I'll just put my Somerville video here for you to check that out. So that's the gist of the pros. Now let's move on to the cons. What are the bad things about living in Charleston? What do the locals have to complain, and what do the people who are moving here have to complain about Charleston? The first con is affordability. Wait, what? Kristyn, didn't you just say affordability was a pro? Well, there is some nuance here, so stick with me. I said relative affordability was a pro. That's because a lot of locals and people that I've grown up with think that Charleston has become expensive. And there is some truth to that. The cost of living has gone up with inflation. That means home prices have also appreciated dramatically in recent years. Some people are finding it more challenging to pay for their rent or pay for their mortgage. However, it depends on what kind of job you have, what kind of industry you're in. Some jobs are not going to keep up with inflation, while other jobs stay competitive or are even getting more competitive as people move here, right? Charleston actually has an expanding job market. We're needing more educators, healthcare workers, tech workers. I heard a radio ad the other day saying that Dorchester 2 School District is hiring and they need all kinds of new employees, from admin to teaching to guidance counselors and things like that. So there are growing jobs in hospitality, shipping, and manufacturing. And what you might not know is that more large companies are moving here because of the tax benefits that South Carolina offers. We already have Boeing, Bosch, Volvo, and what you might not know is that Redwood Materials, a company that was co-founded by one of Tesla's co-founders, is coming to Charleston. And they're investing $3.5 billion into their location here. That's $3.5 billion with a B. That's gonna bring a lot of jobs, and with it, a lot of expansion and growth. So I know I threw a lot at you here, but the point I'm trying to make is that there's plenty of opportunity here, and you can't blame Charleston for affordability issues. The entire country has experienced rapid inflation and increased home prices, so please just zoom out and look at the bigger picture. If you want to learn more about affordability and the cost of living, I've already covered that in detail in this video here. So let's move on to the next con, and that is traffic. Because I've lived here my whole life, I have heard people complain about traffic the whole entire time. I remember being a kid, being in the backseat of my parents' car when they drove me to school years ago. And guess what? They complained about traffic back then, so it's nothing new. However, I do notice that it's taking a little bit longer to get to the office recently. Major roadways like 526 and I-26 are typically the first to get backed up. There's no way to completely avoid it. However, what you can do is prepare and plan to leave a little bit earlier to beat the traffic. So in the morning, if you're gonna leave at 7:30, maybe plan to leave at 7:20. And do the same thing in the afternoon, especially around 5 o'clock. That's when it gets really hairy, so just try to avoid being on the roads at that time. So keep in mind, when you're considering which area you want to live in, make sure you test drive the commute before you commit to living there. Make sure you drive during the busiest hours so you get a feel for what it's actually like. If you're lucky and you're a remote worker or you're about to retire, be glad that you don't have to think about this. Now, speaking of traffic, the next con is the lack of public transportation. You're definitely going to need your own car here because we don't have any subways, we don't have any trains. We do have a few bus routes, but those aren't as reliable and they don't go to every part of Charleston. There are a few bike lanes in West Ashley, Mount Pleasant, and downtown Charleston, but again, those aren't really common. The commute between different parts of town range from 15 to 45 minutes by car, so if you were thinking about Ubering, then that's gonna rack up a hefty bill. So just plan on having a car here. Now, let's move on to the next con, which is the humid climate. Not only is it warm, it is also humid, which makes it even more warm. So if you're coming from the north, prepare to be a little bit sweaty, especially during those hot summer months. If you happen to be coming from Florida or one of the other southern states, then awesome, you're probably used to it already. I had some clients come up from Florida during a record-breaking heat wave. And I was here telling them, hey, it's not usually like this. It's not this hot usually. And they told me, no, this weather is awesome. This is much cooler than where we were in Florida. So even Charleston's record-breaking heat wave could not touch Florida. So it turned out to be a great fit, and those clients will be moving here in 2 weeks. Now, with that out of the way, the next con is another consequence of the humid climate, and that is critters. During the summer, we have critters like mosquitoes, so I like to keep bug spray handy. I keep it in the car, I take it with me when I go to the park, and this is important to think about when you're buying a home. Because when you're looking at a home, sometimes you have the option to add in a screened-in porch. And of course, that's gonna cost extra, but personally, I think it's worth it. Especially if you like to entertain, you like to have people over, definitely get that porch screened in. Now, in the South, we don't just have mosquitoes, but we also have termites. And the humidity of the climate makes the wood extra chewy and extra delicious for termites. So if you're buying a pre-owned home, make sure that it comes with a termite bond. In a lot of new construction communities, they have these little green cartridges in the ground that basically create a barrier around your home so that it keeps critters from getting in. That's one of the bonuses of having a new construction home. Oh, and speaking of critters, we do sometimes have alligators, but that's not really a frequent occurrence. It's not like living in the Florida Everglades. It's a little different. In the 30 years I've been here, I've only seen an alligator like a handful of times. So if you've heard about that and you were scared about that, do not let that deter you. But one thing you should know is this next con, which is the weather. So during the summer months, we do have tropical storms and the occasional hurricane. And with that comes the occasional debris, fallen branches, and things like that in your yard. So if you have anything outside, like a grill, make sure to bring it inside or secure it so that it doesn't move and it doesn't go anywhere. And if there's a major hurricane that's coming, a lot of people will prepare by boarding up their windows, getting enough batteries, candles, flashlights, and things like that. And I also want to mention that a major hurricane hasn't hit Charleston since around the late 90s. We had this hurricane called Hurricane Hugo in 1989, and since then we've had a few small hurricanes, but nothing major recently. So if something major does happen, we will have plenty of notice from all the news stations, the TV channels will be blasting it. You will definitely know. People at work will know. So you'll have a lot of time to prepare. And in extreme cases, you can choose to evacuate way ahead of time. So while I've been here, I think I've had to evacuate maybe 3 times. And when we came back, there was no damage done. Everything was fine. It was a lot of wind and rain, and nothing major happened. Now, one thing that often does come with the storms is the risk of flooding. Because we are on the coast, we are at sea level. Some areas are a little bit below sea level. So when there's a lot of rain, it floods in those areas, especially downtown Charleston. So it's not the entire area of Charleston, and it's not the entire area of downtown. It's certain streets. And that's the same across all of Charleston. If you're closer to water, if you're in a low-lying area, there's more of a risk of flooding. And one way to mitigate that risk is to choose to live in a flood zone with the least amount of risk. So how do you know which flood zones are likely to flood and which ones to avoid? Well, I've covered that in a recent video right here, so make sure that you watch that if you're concerned about flooding. But personally, I've not had issues with big flooding. My house never flooded, my car never got stuck in a flood, but I do know some friends who have gotten stuck downtown during a heavy rain. So just be mindful when it's raining a lot. Now, enough about flooding, because we need to talk about the next con, which is culture. Now, in a previous video, I've mentioned that Southern charm is, the standard kind of culture we have here in Charleston. Southern charm is what I grew up with here, and it's characterized by politeness and manners. So basically, when you go to the grocery store, people will say, "Hi, how are you? How are you doing?" And they might smile, So people here are generally polite and they show their manners. They say, "Yes, ma'am," "No, sir," "Yes, sir." And there's a lot of small talk typically, even if you don't know the person. And that might come off as strange to you. Now, this Southern culture is a little bit in flux right now. We have so many people moving here from different states, even different countries, and I've heard some locals complain that the Southern charm is being diluted. I don't 100% agree with that. It is becoming more diverse, which I actually appreciate, and I think that's a good thing. But if you're coming from a more fast-paced place, we're definitely more slow-paced. Depending on where you're from, you might think we drive slow, or we talk slow, or we're taking too much time to do a task. So, it's important to be mindful of that, so you don't get culture shock. So that's the list for 2024. Welcome to Charleston, and if you're thinking of buying a home here, you don't want to miss this video where I go in depth about how to buy a home. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, send me a text, send me a carrier pigeon. My phone number is in the description below, and I'll see you next time.